For those of you who are new to my space, new to these groups, my name is Yamarie. I'm an expert facilitator here at Circles, and I'm also the founder of Namaste and Slay, a trauma-informed empowerment practice where I specialize in helping individuals identify the wounds and patterns that are holding them back from thriving beyond their circumstances. So unlike our one-off conversations, if you've been in one of my other groups here at Circles, the way that this 8-week challenge is different is that it's designed to walk you through a transformative experience. So for those of you who missed the last few weeks, not to worry. I will be dropping a compiled list of all of the recordings from weeks 1 through week 6 momentarily in the chat box so that you can get caught up with all of the sessions. But what we've been doing is unpacking what narcissistic relationships are, how to cope with the aftermath of those narcissistic relationships, how to set healthier boundaries, and how to break free from those harmful relationship patterns. In this week, we're going to be focusing on how to connect with your inner truth again, which is an important part of reclaiming our identity, developing resilience, and rebuilding self-esteem post-narcissistic relationship. Andrea's share earlier was actually a beautiful real-time example of one of the side effects that comes with narcissistic relationship. Notice how in her share, she was struggling to trust her truth, trust her feelings around what was happening in her situation. How many of you resonate with Andrea's share and have noticed that that's been the case for you? That you're struggling to trust yourself, struggling to even identify what boundaries you need to set, what values it is that you have, because all of that has been distorted as a result of the emotional and mental abuse that you experienced at the hands of the narcissist. So this week, again, we'll be focusing on helping you reclaim those parts of your identity that you've lost so that you can rebuild self-esteem. And with that said, let's go over a few rules for keeping this container safe and supportive so that we understand how to keep this space productive today. First things first, this is a non-judgmental space. We are talking about an extremely heavy and complex topic called narcissistic abuse. And I want to invite you guys to consider that a lot of what is spoken about today can be triggering. So as things come up today, try to focus on your own healing and growth. Refrain from internalizing other people's shares and or minimizing their or your experience. If at any point in time you feel that gets too much for you in the group and you need to step away, I will not take it personally. It's important to honor your emotional safety. And if that means stepping out of this room, I completely understand that today. So not that you need my permission, but you have permission to do whatever's going to keep you safe and supportive in this group today. The other thing I want to mention is active listening. So one of the ways that we avoid unnecessary disruptions in this group is by ensuring that our mics are muted at all times. If I notice that your mic is unmuted, I might go ahead and mute it for you in order to avoid disruptions. I also want to invite you to use your virtual hand, which you'll find at the bottom right-hand screen, to let me know when you want to share and what order you want to share in. So you can click on that when you're ready to share and then click on it one more time when you're done sharing so that I know that you're done with your turn. For those of you who want to participate more passively in today's group, or perhaps are in a space where they cannot speak freely, you can always chime in the conversation by dropping your shares or your questions in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to read those out loud on your behalf. So if we're all on the same page on how to keep this space safe and productive, please go ahead and drop a little heart emoji for me so that I know that you don't have any questions, that you're loud and clear. We're loud and clear on how to keep the space conducive. Okay, amazing. So it seems like everyone here is on the same page. If there's any questions about anything that I just said, right now would be the time to ask me any of those questions. Okay, so it seems like we're all on the same page. All right, guys, for those of you who just walked in, we are in week 6 of this 8-week resilience challenge, Rising Above Narcissism. And the focus today is unlocking your inner wisdom. So for those of you who weren't able to join us in previous weeks, we previously explained that narcissistic relationships exhibit sadistic patterns of manipulation, control, and a complete disregard for our well-being that can leave us feeling depleted, disoriented, vulnerable, and very confused. How many of you resonate with that share? Drop a little heart emoji for me if you resonate with that. That now post-narcissistic abuse, you feel depleted, disoriented, and vulnerable, which really takes a toll on your ability to trust yourself again. So because of that, this week we're focusing on how to restore trust in ourselves. And so if we're going to do that, it's going to be important for us to start off today's conversation by defining self-trust and what that means. So by its very definitions, guys, self-trust is the confidence and belief in one's abilities, judgment, and reliability. So a lot of what we're going to be exploring today is how those things might have been impacted by the narcissistic relationships that you endured. And when we're looking at this in the context of narcissistic relationships, it involves rebuilding faith in our capacity to make healthier decisions, set boundaries, and prioritize our well-being. So if we're going to do this, there's three muscles that we're going to have to build. That's confidence, compassion, and consistency. I'm going to repeat that one more time. If we're going to rebuild self-trust, which is going to support us in the ability in the skill set of keeping ourselves safe again, it is going to be important for us to rebuild three emotional muscles: confidence, compassion, and consistency. Think of those as the three C's for rebuilding self-trust. So let's officially start off today's conversation by exploring how our confidence may have been eroded by these narcissistic relationships. The first question I want to pose to the group today is, what values and goals were compromised by your narcissistic relationship? If by its very definition, confidence means the ability to make choices that align with our values and goals, we're going to have to explore what values may have been compromised. So what values and goals were compromised by your narcissistic relationship? Who's open to sharing first? Beth Ann, feel free to share.
Sorry about that. My microphone wasn't working. Was my integrity. I felt like my integrity was always hit because I didn't have a voice. And I always had to try to validate myself. And even though I was being authentic, I still could never convey or prove enough, even though I showed up for the relationship, to that person, that, you know what I mean, that I was really there for them, because they weren't really there for themselves, so they could not be there for me. So it was always a struggle for me to have to try to, you know what I mean, it was a tug of war of trying to have that person validate me, which really hit my self-esteem super bad.
Thank you for that vulnerable share, Beth Ann. How many of you, like Beth Ann, noticed that your integrity and your autonomy, meaning your free will, your ability to exercise your free will, were compromised by these narcissistic relationships? Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Beth Ann, and for being specific with us and giving us some examples. Who else would like to share at this time? How were your values impacted, values and goals compromised by these narcissistic relationships? Again, if one of the muscles that we have to rebuild is confidence, and confidence is the ability to make choices aligned with our values, how were those things compromised in your narcissistic connections? I want to invite everyone at this time to think about specific instances or patterns that may have taken a toll on their values and their goals. Pamela, feel free to share when you're ready.
Yeah, I guess my autonomy with my time, how I spent my time, it had to be on his schedule and his terms, and when it worked out for him. And if I voiced that, I wanted to spend my time doing something else, or I needed to leave a conversation, it was no, the conversation was over when he said it was over. And so I felt that, or so in those situations, my time, how I spent my time was not my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And how might some of that be still affecting you now?
I feel, anxious, I guess.
Yes.
I feel anxious.
Anxious. How many of you have noticed that you feel extremely anxious post-narcissistic relationship, perhaps for the same reasons that Pamela just shared? When someone else is in control of our autonomy, our time, what we do with our time, what we do with ourselves, it can be very jarring leaving that narcissistic relationship. It's almost like we don't know what to do with ourselves. So that's certainly one of the ways that we can be impacted or our values can be impacted, but not only our values are also our well-being. Who else would like to share at this time? John, are you accidentally unmuted or would you like to share? Go ahead, John.
So let's see, I'm an empath, and so I met a narcissist, and there was intense magnetic pull and attraction there, because she's the taker and I'm the giver. Unbeknownst to what I was entering into when I met her, she's also had some drug addiction problems, specifically like crack cocaine and ketamine, and has dependencies on those things. And I sacrificed my own values to follow along in that type of destructive and use and behavior, with the exception of the crack cocaine. I never did that. I recently went through the discard, which was absolutely atrocious, and was hospitalized for suicidal ideation, and continuously perseverate on a daily basis, almost like in an obsessive way, around how it all sort of fell apart and collapsed. But I did make sacrifices in terms of my own values for my kids, and really pursued pleasure with her rather than more sort of truthful intellectual pursuits, professional pursuits, spiritual pursuits, more just hedonistic, all about just pleasure. And that's not a core value for me. And I made that sacrifice for her, only to be ruthlessly discarded in an extremely cruel way. And it's something that I struggle with daily and regularly.
Thank you for that vulnerable share, John. Well, hopefully by the end of today's conversation, you'll have more insight on how to rebuild and restore some of those values. I'm so sorry that you went through that. But as we heard in John's share, he said, I traded in a lot of my deeply held principles for livings and beliefs for the sake of having someone by my side. How many of you have acknowledged that you might have done the same? Drop a little heart emoji for me if you might have done the same. As you can see, John, you're not alone. Connection is a basic human need. Just like plants need water, air, and dirt, human needs connection to thrive. And unfortunately, in narcissistic relationships, that connection can become both unhealthy and the thing that we feel we need in order to thrive and survive, right? But it's not necessarily the case. It's that our realities become distorted. So thank you for that, John.
Thank you.
The other thing that John mentioned, which is important to note here, is he said there was an intense connection in the beginning. And then if you listen to his story, it went south. How many of you experienced the same? Intense connection that went south. Now, here's how that might have affected your ability to trust yourself. It's, I can't trust my feelings, right? This creates the belief system that we can't trust our feelings. How many of you are there now? Where now you don't trust yourself because I thought this person was my soulmate. I thought this person was the one, and my feelings led me into a trap. Now, here's the thing, guys. We're going to be talking about this a little bit more later on in the second part of this conversation, but it's not that your feelings are a trap. It's that your feelings are data, and perhaps we weren't looking at all the data, right? Your feelings are data, and perhaps we weren't looking at all the data. The way we want to start looking at feelings is they're not good or bad. They simply are. They're information. And my job is to investigate the information, look at the information from all angles to make decisions that practice putting my well-being first. Does that make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that makes sense. So your job is not to ignore the data, and it's not to make the data wrong. It's simply to explore why the data is even there. Right? Where are these feelings coming from? What are they rooted in? So that I can make decisions that help keep me safe and supported. All right. Thank you for that, John. Okay. So if confidence is believing in our ability to make choices that align with our values, and as you've heard, many of you traded in some values and goals in an effort to hold on to these connections. What values might you have to reinforce to rebuild self-trust after this narcissistic abuse? Right? John just said to us, I traded in a lot of my values. I traded in a lot of the stuff that was important to me. What were some of those things that he might have traded in, that you might have traded in an effort to hold on to these connections? Let's get clear on that, because these are the values that we're going to have to learn how to reinforce. Andrea, feel free to share. Andrea, you might be muted, hun. Andrea, are you with us?
Oh no.
Okay, there you go, Andrea. You're on. You're here.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can. We lost you for a second, but you're here.
Okay, I'm sorry. My app froze on me again. The question I was gonna say, my self-respect would be the answer I would have for that. You said, what did we trade in for this? I traded my own self-respect.
And what does that mean? Can you help define that for the group here today? Because things like self-love, self-respect, they're words that we hear often, but sometimes it can make it a little bit intangible for us, right? So what does self-respect look like for you?
For me,
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, I don't know how to quite put it in words, but to devalue my own self by allowing someone to keep telling me I'm something that I'm not, just to make them happy, I have to prove that I'm not the person that they say I am. I mean, it takes its toll. So I guess I see that as my self-respect, or how I feel about myself, if I'm making any sense.
You are making complete
Yeah.
sense, Andrea. So I'm going to go ahead and summarize that share for you. What Andrea said is self-respect does not undermine my own well-being and my own self-esteem. Right? Someone said this in one of the groups the other day, practicing esteem building activities, meaning I don't do anything that destroys my confidence. I don't engage in a relationship that destroys my confidence or an activity that destroys my confidence. Right? So what Andrea is saying here is I started undermining my own well-being, and therefore I lost self-respect, which also means she lost the ability to trust herself. Right? Because what she just taught her brain is that she can't keep herself safe. Now, it was innocently and it was unknowingly, but these are the consequences of allowing ourselves to believe or buy into the narrative that the narcissistic individuals feed us. Hope, feel free to share when you're ready.
I feel like the thing I struggle with the most is I feel like my identity was slowly kind of stripped away from me. Things I was interested in, things that I loved, were all devalued, diminished. Um, and I have to like rebuild, like go back to the basics. Like, what do I value? What do I like? And it's a challenge for sure.
Yes, identity. How many of you resonate with that share? So when we're talking about losing our identity, this is why this piece on values is so important, because when we're losing our values, we're trading in belief systems that might be important to our self-preservation. We're also giving up aspects of our personality, our characteristics that make us who we are. So thank you for that, Hope. Brenda, what else?
I want to say thank you to Circles. First of all, thank you guys. Thank you so much. I have a Christian psychology and I am a psychiatrist. And it was until you guys that I could understand because I thought, you know,
Oh, Brenda, I think we lost you for a second. Are you still with us, Brenda?
One working ICU. I mean, had 2 kids. I didn't even know I was bedridden for like 2 years. My family said 3. And I didn't even know I have been separated for 2 months and a half now. Made that decision finally. And I didn't even know how to start the electricity or the water. I was like, what's going on? I mean, I felt I felt like I didn't belong in Earth. I mean, I was even afraid to read something medical and write about it. I'm not working yet again. I'm working towards it. I want to go to the healing process, but this is nothing like I ever seen. Nothing.
Thank, thank you for sharing that, Brenda. So, to Brenda's point, it can strip us of our basic humanity. She said, I didn't know how to do basic things on my own. I couldn't even turn on the water, turn on the light on my own. That's how much control the narcissistic individual had taken over her life. And I'm so sorry that you went through that, Brenda, but I'm so proud of you for having the courage to be here with us today and share your testimony, share your story of how you've not only survived that, but are learning to figure out how to thrive beyond that. So thank you for that, Brenda.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, so guys, now that we've gotten clear on some of the ways that narcissistic relationships take a toll on our confidence, why it takes a toll on our confidence, what that means, how we might have to rewrite values and restore values in order to start to recover from that. I want to invite you guys to look at the next C that we mentioned earlier in our conversation. Earlier, we said if we're going to rebuild self-trust, we have to rebuild the following emotional muscles: confidence, compassion, and consistency. Now, we just spoke a little bit about confidence, but now I want to draw your attention to the second C, compassion, which is the practice of extending kindness, understanding, and acceptance towards oneself. Okay. So at this time, I want to invite you to look back and not only some of the persistent feelings that you experience in these narcissistic dynamics, but also some of the ways that you practice not extending that, right? Some of the ways that you fell into patterns of being unkind, lacking empathy for yourself, lacking acceptance. And what were some of those patterns that showed up for you? So again, looking back, what were some of the persistent feelings or persistent patterns of behavior that lacked compassion on your behalf? Compassion towards self. We're only focusing on self, that manifested in those relationships, because all of this is data. Beth Ann, feel free to share.
I guess it would be like self-doubt, because I was gaslit so much that it impacted my self-worth. So I always second-guessed myself, which made it hard for me to trust myself, which made it hard for me to be consistent and compassionate. And then I struggled with kindness, but I got through that one. So yeah, that was the biggest thing, just abandoning myself for, I don't know what reason, I just don't understand why I did that. 'Cause
Well,
I
you were
felt rejected.
manipulated into doing so, Beth Ann. Right? So one of the things you're saying here is I stopped validating my feelings, right? We talked a little bit about this earlier. I started ignoring my feelings and minimizing my feelings instead of accepting that that they were there and they were there for a reason. Guys, our feelings, I want to invite you guys to look at feelings as part of your inner compass. Now, it doesn't mean that your inner compass is always 100% accurate. For example, those of us who suffer trauma, which everyone in this room has because you've been exposed to a narcissistic relationship, our compass can be thrown off and we can start to see the world through the lens of our trauma, which can make it very difficult to gauge, like, okay, how much of this is my feelings? How much of this is rooted and based on logic, right? But feelings, nonetheless, are part of your built-in alarm system. That's that invitation to go explore. Is it smoke or is it fire? Right? And the only way we're going to be able to determine is it smoke or is it fire is by taking the time to observe all of the details and all of the data beyond our feelings. Does that make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that makes sense. So what Beth Ann says is, I got to a point for me in my relationship where that alarm was going off so often that I stopped even listening to alarm. It's kind of like when you have a smoke alarm and the battery needs to be changed, right? The narcissist will constantly make it so that alarm is going off in your inner system, which can make it very challenging for you to trust yourself. So thank you for that share, Beth Ann. Hopefully that analogy is making sense. Did that analogy make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me. Just want to make sure I didn't make that all the more confusing for you. Okay, amazing. Lisa, feel free to share when you're ready.
I think the hardest part for me is I started to just hate myself because I did not want to be everything that he said I was. And I felt guilt for, like, I saw truth in what he said, like, I do this because you do this, or and I didn't want to be that person so badly that I would feel such remorse and guilt so constantly. Just like, I want to be a better person. I can be a better person, and I'm sorry, but being the only one that made all of the effort, I didn't want to be that person.
Yeah, so what Lisa just said is, I internalized someone else's lack of acceptance. What did we say compassion was earlier? The practice of extending kindness, understanding, and acceptance to oneself. So in this case, what Lisa said is, this person's inability to extend kindness, understanding, and acceptance towards me made me feel like I was wrong for being me. How many of you felt the same? Drop a little heart emoji if you started to feel like you were flawed in some way, you were broken, you were wrong, right? Yes, that's the narcissist is great at manipulating us into thinking that we are inherently flawed, okay? So unfortunately for Lisa and many of you, you started to internalize the projections that were going on in the narcissist's mind. Thank you for that, Lisa. LJ, feel free to share when you're ready.
I guess what I really didn't like about myself in this relationship was I started to stoop to the same level, which I've never done with anyone. But the barrage of insults would just come and come and come and come, and then I would just break and I would fire back. And I'm not proud of that. I'm not. It's hard for me to swallow.
LJ, I'm sorry to hear that. How many of you experienced the same? Drop a little heart emoji for me. We call that reactive abuse, guys. And while I know it doesn't feel good because you individuals are people of integrity, people who have a lot of empathy, compassion, and love, it's a normal response to being abused. So the way that I invite you to look at that, LJ, is the equivalent of someone poking the tiger and then saying, why did the tiger bite my arm off? Right? You can only take so much abuse before you crack. We are all hardwired to survive. And so in an effort to survive, you became reactively abusive, and you're not the only one who experiences that, LJ. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, guys. LJ, I'm going to go ahead and mute you to avoid noise pollution. We've got some clinking going on back there, but thank you so much for that share. Now, let's continue to bring it back to the discussion, guys. So far, for those of you who just walked in, we've defined what self-trust means today. So we are in week 6 of Thriving Beyond Narcissistic Abuse. And the focus of week 6 is self-trust. If you've missed any of the previous weeks, do not worry. You will still find the session valuable. You can always check out the Spotify link that I dropped in the chat box earlier to catch up on weeks 1 through 5. Not only did we define what self-trust is, which is rebuilding our capacity to make healthy decisions, set boundaries, and prioritize our well-being, we also talked about the 3 C's that are going to be required to do that, which is rebuilding confidence, rebuilding compassion, and rebuilding consistency. We need confidence, compassion, and consistency to rebuild our self-trust again. So what we've been focusing on in today's conversation is talking about all the different ways that our confidence may have been shaken by being exposed to these narcissistic relationships, how it might have been diminished, as well as what we're talking about right now, compassion. So how was your ability to practice compassion towards oneself affected as well? So going back to the question that we had at hand, we explained that because survivors of narcissistic abuse experience a lot of gaslighting, meaning that your feelings are distorted, dismissed, and denied, it's going to be important for us to look back and analyze the persistent feelings that came up for us in the narcissistic relationships, as well as our persistent patterns of treating ourselves so that we can understand what to avoid moving forward. So the question was, for those of you who just walked in, looking back, what were some of the persistent feelings that you had, or some of the persistent ways that you showed a lack of compassion for yourself in those dynamics? Hope, feel free to share.
I was consistently like my feelings, meaning mental and also bodily. Like if I was feeling sick, it was always invalidated. And, eventually I thought they'd say, oh, you're too sensitive, or oh, you're being paranoid, or oh, you're a hypochondriac. And then I started looking into my feelings, just like, what? Oh, well, if they're not real, who cares? I'm looking into them. And I started looking into body sensations, and my body was telling me things, and my emotions were telling me things. And so I started turning inwards to start listening to them. So they'd say, no, you're not feeling that way. I'm like, well, you're not me. I am feeling that way.
Hope, that's a beautiful explanation of what we talked about earlier, the importance of investigating our feelings, right? Sometimes we're going to investigate and we're going to come to the conclusion that, okay, maybe it's not what I thought it was. But if we don't investigate, we will never know. So what Hope said is, I stopped ignoring my feelings, especially some of the sensations that I was feeling in my body. And I started recognizing them as part of my built-in alarm system, that they were telling me that something was seriously wrong in this relationship or in me that I needed to explore so that I could become healthy again. Beautiful, Hope. Brenda, what else?
Well, I'm a survival. So it's been only 2 months and a half, only 3 weeks, 4 weeks with the last communication. I learned no communication. And I, he'll tell me things that will literally, I cannot tell you what he said because I don't even remember. Things that will destroy me. And I remember in a specific day that I called him and to give him some good news that the company lawyer called me to tell me, and something good about my daughter. God bless her, is studying in New York. And I called him because he wanted me to tell him everything. Which, okay, I mean, I don't have nothing to hide. That's the other thing. They look for very empathetic people. And I remember that I called him, and after I talked to him, I was like, I told God, you know what, do whatever you want with me. I don't deserve to be here. I mean, it was all that he told me. I don't know how to describe it because it's so painful and awful. And I'm not talking about cursing words. I'm talking about the most inner things that you share with them. He's my husband, hopefully to be ex-husband. I took 170 milligrams of Xanax, have a new bottle. And it wasn't until like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago with this new lawyer that I have that is great. She stopped there when I was telling that story, but that story for me was nothing. I was the one that took it, right? So I never put a blame on him. He said, who took you to the hospital? Why they didn't take you to the hospital? You should have been dead. And then the medical in my brain kicks in, and I said, she's right. I said, well, I don't know. The next day, that was early in the morning. The next day in the afternoon, he called my sister and told my sister, come and pick your sister up. I had to work. He's a lawyer. Okay. I was covering bruises. Somebody unconscious cannot fall because he's unconscious. And with 170 milligrams of Xanax, you will be unconscious for more than 20. You can really die. No joke.
So Brenda, I apologize. I'm going to just stop you there so that we can consolidate your share. I really appreciate the vulnerability. But I just want to take a moment for us to reflect on what Brenda just shared. When we're bringing it into the context of compassion, what she said is, this person was so emotionally destructive, mentally, physically destructive to me, abusive to me, that I completely lost sight of my humanity. I couldn't even recognize when I was on the brink of death. Let's think about how powerful that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the fact that you're still here, Brenda, which I'm so happy that you were not successful. I'm so happy that you
Thank
did
you. That was
this.
good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And that you're here to share that testimony with this group so that other people on their journey can truly understand and see through your experience the impacts of narcissistic abuse and why the work that we're doing is so important here. So thank you for that, Brenda. Again, this is how it destroyed not only her self-trust, but her self-compassion and her ability to keep herself safe. She stopped being able to recognize when she was on the brink of complete destruction. Thank you for that, Brenda. All right, John, when you're ready, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so sort of, I guess, continuing on the theme of recognizing my own codependency, I lost the ability to self-care throughout this journey, which started, sort of in March. Prior to that, I was eating well and going to the gym every day and running. When I was in my relationship, I was inspired to do that because I was giving so much of myself to someone else who was a taker. And then that giving empowered me to do a lot of self-care. And when I was so viciously and cruelly discarded, and she moved on like immediately and into someone else's house, like within weeks, it just completely tore me down. And I've still yet to get to a place where I can self-motivate, right? Like my interests in things that I used to do are completely gone. They don't exist. You know, I don't cook for myself. I don't work out. I perseverate all day, because I don't have someone to care for. And what I've come to realize is that probably irrespective of being narcissistically abused and taken advantage of, by simply asking for one simple boundary, which was common courtesy and respect, I fear that, the way I feel is stuck, and that I won't be able to get myself back to self-care and compassion.
So here's the
Because,
good news, John.
yeah, okay,
Here's the good news, John, as I listen to you. And sorry again, we have 17 minutes left, so I'm just trying to keep
sure,
the shares
yeah,
brief.
understood.
The good news is you can learn it again, right? And I can say that with confidence because I have helped plenty of people relearn how to self-love and self-care. And it starts with these three things that we talked about here today, that we're talking about here today and unpacking. Once you learn what confidence in action looks like, once you learn what compassion in action looks like, and you start practicing it, even though it's hard, even though it's uncomfortable, even though sometimes you don't want to, the practice of that starts rebuilding our self-esteem and self-trust again. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah.
So it's like any other goal in life, we have to reverse engineer it. Just like if we wanted to lose weight, the weight isn't going to just shed off on its own if we don't actually get up and at least start walking, or at least start getting on the bicycle or go for a run. It's going to take baby steps for sure, John. But if we know what it takes to lose the emotional pounds, we can reverse engineer it and get there. So that's the good news. So as we start moving to the wrap-up portion today, for John and for anyone else who feels the same, who feels like, I don't know how I'm going to get there, start thinking closely about how you can start literally put some tangible SMART goals next to it, specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, time sensitive, right? Put some SMART goals next to what it is that you're going to have to do to be a little bit more kind, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more self-honoring. And eventually you'll start to feel it again. But it takes time and it takes patience, John. Thank you for that, John. Okay, guys. So similar to what Brenda shared, what John just said is I lost my sense of purpose, right? Now think about it, guys. We exist as supply to the narcissistic individual. That means that you are no longer human. You only exist to serve a purpose to them. So, of course, it makes sense that once the narcissist leaves, now our sense of purpose is gone. Our sense of humanity has been stripped throughout that relationship. So now we don't understand who we are, what we are, if we are not here to serve them. Does that make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that makes sense. And even though, yes, it is true that you feel that way, right? It doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. We get to rebuild those muscles by practicing those 3 C's that we talked about today. Making sure that we get clear on our values and we start taking action in alignment with those values. Making sure that we don't do anything or unintentionally sign up for anything that is destructive to our confidence. Making sure that we're consciously making an effort to practice kindness, understanding, and acceptance. And now, the last C, consistency. Any lasting change is going to require consistency, no matter what the goal is. But especially in the context of narcissistic relationships, guys, it's going to take commitment to being brave and consistent. Does that make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that makes sense. So we're going to have to consistently, consciously make an effort to be brave enough to put ourselves first again, to prioritize our values and our needs again. So with that understanding, let's start talking a little bit more about this last C here, consistency. Now that you've learned everything that you've learned today, how can you use what you learned to be more consistent and intentional about how you self-preserve and prioritize your well-being moving forward? Who's open to sharing? Hope, feel free to share.
I just like how you put everything clear and concisely into categories, because it's really hard to do that after this, like with your brain. So it helps set the goals better. Like I can look at one, like compassion, and figure out what's one thing a day I can do for myself that shows compassion. And go from there, and then go down the list as you master each one.
I love that, Hope. So what is one thing that you can do daily to practice a little bit more compassion towards yourself? Can you come up with a specific one for us?
Saying no.
That's a beautiful goal. Learning to say no. And guys, for those of you who are here and really struggle with saying no, it gets to be imperfect in the beginning, right? When we're learning how to trust ourselves again, when we're learning how to teach our brains that we understand how to keep ourselves safe again, it's okay for you to say no at the first sight of it doesn't feel like a yes until you learn how to strengthen that muscle. So if it even kind of feels like a no, give yourself permission to say no. Give yourself permission to say not now. Give yourself permission to say that's not for me, so that we can start to exercise that muscle, because it's been pretty weakened by all of the gaslighting and abuse that you've experienced. And once we're confident that that muscle is pretty strong again, then we can kind of up the ante and get fancy with our rules and effective formulas for communication. Okay. All right. What else? So for those of you who may have just walked in, the question was, how can you use what you've learned today to be more consistent and intentional about how to self-preserve and prioritize your well-being moving forward? And if you weren't here for most of the conversation, just try to focus on that last part. What are some things that you can start doing consistently to make sure that you're prioritizing your well-being and self-preserving? Bluey, feel free to share.
Definitely in the morning, in the mirror when you're getting ready, or whatever time it is you wake up to get ready, telling yourself something that's amazing about yourself, just even if it's just one thing.
Yes, I love that. So that's a good example of positive affirmations and using mirror work as a powerful tool for positive affirmations, right? Making sure that you're looking at yourself in the eyes and reminding yourself of how deserving you are of love, kindness, and compassion. Beautifully said, Louie. Pamela, what
Thank you.
else?
Yeah, I was just, as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about how what was done to me is now over, hopefully, but I'm continuing the cycle internally. Like I'm harping on my mistakes, or I'm um, not allowing myself to enjoy the life I want to have or to live life to the fullest. So I think it's recognizing that what was done to me is gone and past, and I can't undo that. I can't control it, but I don't need to continue that path internally with myself. I can meditate in the morning. I started doing that. Also, working out, um, get back on working out on a regular basis, and then just start setting some goals for my life and feel hopeful for the future instead of, this despairing I'm doing.
Beautiful, Pamela. So not only can you start practicing incorporating some self-care routines like meditation and exercise, but one of the important things that I took from your share right now is reminding yourself that the only mistake you made was loving someone who didn't have the capacity to love back. That's the only mistake you made. And if that's the mistake that you made, that's a beautiful expression of your empathy, kindness, compassion, and humanity. And we don't want anyone to take that away from you, right? So the only thing you did, the only mistake you made was trust someone with your heart who did not have the skill sets or the capacity to protect it. Thank you for that, Pamela. Now, I can't tell if that hand raise from Louie is from before or if it's from now. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Louie. Louie, are you up right now or is it Brenda? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll take it down.
No worries. Thank you, Louie. Just helps me know what order we're working with here. Brenda, feel free to share when you're ready.
Since I'm starting on this, been 2 months and a half that I've been separated from my husband. I been I pretty much feel scared, so I created a routine. I mean, but every time that I have to deal with somebody like him or somebody that attacks, I fall into the same isolated thing. I mean, I change. I need my routine back. The routine that I was getting up early, being sure that the dog has a routine too. I have a 16-year-old Pickapoodle. I have the routine for my plants, a routine for me. I have goals, and I don't know how to deal every time. There is people that when they talk like they're gonna hit you. Before I was able to handle that and escalate the problem, now I just want to run away and hide, like in a cocoon. And I wonder if one soon I'm gonna be able to be normal again.
Brenda, same thing we shared with John earlier. With patience and commitment, it is possible, but it is going to take time. Now, one of the important aspects from Brenda's share that I want to share with the group, she mentioned routine. The reason why routine can be so important post narcissistic abuse is, again, your autonomy was stripped, your sense of stability was stripped, and having routine and creating some kind of structure gives you consistency so that you feel safe again. Does that make sense, guys? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that makes sense. So one of the things that Brenda's saying I'm consistently doing in order to create a sense of safety for me in my life is eliminating and minimizing some of the predictability by making sure that I have some kind of structure that creates a sense of safety for me. So that's a huge one. Thank you for that one, Brenda. All right, guys, we have 6 minutes left. Just want to take a quick moment to stop and drop just your attention to the chat box. Since we have 6 minutes left, again, this is week 6 of the Thriving Beyond Narcissism Challenge. We are focusing on rebuilding self-trust. And I just added a challenge, as those of you who know who have been here the last few weeks, I added a challenge that you can put into practice post-session to reinforce what you learned today. So now that I brought your attention there, let's get back to the discussion at hand and brainstorm a few more ideas. So bringing it back to the question that we just asked, how can we learn to be more consistent? Consistent means, right, that we do it on a regular basis. How can we practice being more consistent and intentional about how we self-preserve and prioritize our well-being so that we can restore our self-trust and confidence? Beth Ann, feel free to share.
Okay. How can we be more consistent? By practicing gratitude is one of the things, and alignment, and being self-aware and being the chooser of your choices.
Oh, those are three great ones, right? Being self-aware, practicing gratitude, and making sure that we are being conscious of where we're giving away our power. That's what Brenda meant when she said being the chooser of our choices. How many of you acknowledge that you may have unintentionally made yourself the choice rather than the chooser? Drop a little heart emoji for me if that's you. Yeah, we do that. That's the bulk of the group here, right? We do that when we make someone else responsible for our autonomy, our well-being, by not being conscious about the choices and the decisions that we're making in the process. So I love that, Brenda. All right, Hope, feel free to share when you're ready.
One, sorry. One small thing that I've been challenging and changing. I am diabetic, so diet and my body helps me keep up the consistency. Unfortunately, it did develop during the stressful time. I developed it and I didn't have it before, but it is helping me put up boundaries that I didn't even think, oh, food, a choice. It's an important choice. It's what you're putting into your body.
Hope, that was beautiful. Boundaries. She's not just talking about boundaries with other people, boundaries with ourselves. Right, guys? When we don't set boundaries around all of those things that we talked about today, our values, our beliefs, our needs, that's where we start losing ourselves. And when we're being exposed to a narcissistic relationship, that becomes very dangerous, as we've seen in many of the shares here today from John, from Brenda, and many of the other folks in the room with us. All right, guys. So with the 3 minutes left, again, just want to bring your attention to the group chat. If you're interested in reinforcing some of what you learned here today, go ahead and make sure that you screenshot that challenge that I dropped there. And next week, I want to remind you that we're going to continue this challenge and we'll be focusing on practical tips for stepping into your power. So if you really enjoyed today's conversation, you're definitely going to get a lot of value out of next week as well. All right, with these 3 minutes that we have left, now that we've talked about how to rebuild self-trust, what self-trust means, and what it's going to take to get there, again, those 3 C's, guys, I just want to do a pop quiz. What are those 3 C's? Who can unmute themselves and tell me what those 3 C's are? Go ahead, Andrea.
Confidence, compassion, and consistency.
Yes, beautiful. So now that we know how to do it, now that we know how to rebuild that self-trust, I want to invite you guys to think about one thing you're going to commit to doing between now and the next time that you join us to make sure that you're reinforcing this. What's one thing you're going to commit to doing? We talked about all the different things we can do, but what's one small thing you're going to commit to doing? Let's make that commitment to ourselves right now. What's that one thing you're going to do? You can drop it in the chat box or you can go ahead and raise your hand when you're ready. What's the one thing you're going to commit to doing? Beth Ann, feel free to share.
To stop judging myself when I'm not feeling right. To learn how to be consistently kind to myself more so often, and to give myself a chance to accomplish the SMART goals that I have before me, like losing weight and stuff like that.
Yes, love that. So she's going to set some SMART goals around compassion and confidence building, specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, time sensitive. Not sure if I said that right earlier, so I just wanted to repeat that since my words got jumbled. And she's going to practice less judgment. That's something that we can all start doing together here as a group. And we've got a few in the chat box as well. Sandra says, breathe deeply and fully. So she's going to commit to a practice of deep breath work on a regular basis. And Lisa says, say No. Beautiful, guys. Thank you so much for showing up powerfully for yourself and for the other members of this group. Again, if you missed the last few weeks, do not worry. Actually, let me go ahead and grab that link for you one more time. You can always check out this session, which will be uploaded within 24 hours, and the previous sessions on Spotify. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat box for you one more time, so that you guys know where you can access that. So until next time, guys, please be safe and practice putting yourself first just a little bit more. Take care, guys.